You're listening to Alternative Investor Mastermind, where we do a deep dive on alternative investment opportunities and the lifestyle it can create. Join Jack Krupey as he presents actionable tips and tricks in doing passive real estate away from mainstream strategies. Go beyond the usual fix and flips and try less explored yet rewarding investing ventures, from multifamily properties, mobile homes to cryptocurrencies. Do not miss this opportunity to escape traditional assets and finally create wealth without Wall Street. Now your host, Jack.
No discussions in the podcast are meant as an offer to sell or a solicitation for an offer to buy any security. All investments should be done after careful review and consideration of the investment documents and disclosures. Contents discussed in the podcast are not meant to be construed as an investment, tax, or legal advice. Individuals should always consult his or her own professional advisors before any investment decision.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of the Alternative Investor Mastermind. Today, I've got a great guest here. I've known him a long time. He's an expert on marketing and a great overall guy, Scott Corbett. Scott.
So good to be here, Jack. So good to finally do this. We've been trying for a while now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had to delay because of the hurricane a week or two ago. So, Scott, I always like to just hear people's story of how you kind of got into your business and your exposure to alternative investments.
All righty. So, here's the super short version, Jack. I was actually a school teacher. I was an English teacher, and this was in 2003. And my wife and I had our first child, who's my son Hawks, and amazing experience. It was so good. And then, shortly after Hawks was born, my wife Kundi said to me, she's like, "Hey, I really don't want to go back to work. Is there anything you can do to make some more money?" And I said, let me think about that. And so I started doing research and started just trying everything, right? And pretty soon I figured some things out and I started my own business. And this is really the short version. And I've got an entrepreneurial background. All the men in my family own their own businesses. They're chronically unemployable. But eventually I figured it all out. Within a few years, I quit teaching. I was doing my own thing full time. And that eventually morphed into developing a marketing company, Lightmark Media, that I still own today and still work in every day. And that brought me to people like you, Jack, largely because I developed a relationship with Jason Medley from the Collective Genius, right? And good grief, I don't even know when this was, 2011, 2012, somewhere around then. And so then I started meeting all of these real estate guys, because prior to that, it's we would do marketing for attorneys and plastic surgeons and, the occasional real estate agent, but we were not solely focused on real estate. But in fact, I think I met you. Did I meet you at CG or did I meet you through Dave Van Horn? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it was through Dave Van Horn originally. It was well before, but then we connected again at CG and some other events. Yeah.
Okay. So, meeting guys like Dave Van Horn, meeting Jason Medley, joining CG, all of a sudden, not only did I realize that I'm really fascinated by real estate investing, and that includes, the active side of it, but also particularly the passive side, and love the business, believe in it, really enjoy the people that I was meeting inside this world, just love the entrepreneurial spirit, loved the vibe of these people who are out just making things, building things, improving things. And it's such a great source of joy. And I'm so grateful to be able to work with those people every day. And now that's really all we do. On the marketing side, we're primarily 80, maybe 85% focused on helping people like you, Jack, and other people raise capital for various kinds of projects and various kinds of asset classes. But it's so much fun. So lucky to be doing it.
Yeah, we certainly share the passion, and it's amazing when you find a business that doesn't feel like work.
Yes, absolutely. And and to be able to do business with people who are fun to work with, like they're driven, you admire them. It's like, what's that famous Jim Rohn quote about you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with? I mean, so I really think there's a lot of truth to that. I always kind of like remind my kids of the truth of that too. Like, hey guys, be careful who you're hanging out with, because you're going to become them in some ways. And in our case, it's like all these people we hang out with, my gosh, I mean, they've upped my business game, my personal game, my health game, my being a good husband and father game. It's just been great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And being in it so long too, it's been amazing to watch the growth and the transformation of many people. Have been in this business over, both of us 20 years plus now.
Yeah,
it's pretty wild. So I never knew that you were a school teacher first. I don't recall that. So that's a pretty awesome transition.
Yeah, and honestly, I really loved it. Like there was. I just love the work. I like kids. Believe it or not, I actually like teenagers, which is sort of unusual because they're kind of hard to like sometimes. But yeah, I really love that whole world. And I mean, like I was teacher of the year the last 2 years I was there at this one school. I mean, and that's not so much because I'm like the greatest teacher in the world, but I loved what I did. I loved the kids. They could pick up on that sort of thing. And it was really great. And you know what I'll say, Jack? Before that, I was like one of those guys I was real academic. I was real kind of nerdy and actually got a degree in literature, a graduate degree in literature. It's like, good Lord, like, well, how did I go from there to here? Well, the thing is, it's all about being able to communicate, That's really what it came down to. It's like, I'm a really good communicator, and I can do it in writing. I can do it in websites. I can do it, I mean, I'm actually okay as a speaker. I'm actually not a great speaker, and then that's where it led to, because gosh, everybody has to learn how to tell this story, and we help people do that.
Yeah. So this is a little bit of a personal question maybe, but, I grew up and I knew I wanted to be rich at like 5 years old. I saw the stress of my parents. I didn't necessarily know where, but like I was money hungry and aggressive and, was looking at those college books and was like, like information technology makes 50 grand a year. It was like, one of the highest paying things. So like, I was just like kind of early on, just like, I want to make money and, teacher. And it sounds like you came from an entrepreneurial family, but it sounds like what in this day and age, some people run up 200 grand with like a degree in literature, and I assume you weren't making that much money. And kudos for making the transition. But do you recall kind of where you loved it that much, or you just really didn't think about money in your college years? You're just like you'll figure it out, and then you ultimately did. But I'm just curious the transition or where you were at that moment.
No, I mean, it is a personal question, but it's a really good one. I have to tell you, Jack, like part of it was me like not wanting to follow my old man's path. I mean, that really is like one of those like rebellious things, and beyond that, I mean, it's like, and plus I have to say, like growing up in a household where my father owned his own business, I experienced some of the downsides of that. You know what I mean? Like him not being at my athletic events, him not being around that much. He quite often would not even go on vacation with us. Like in fact, it's sort of like the way it was in my family. It was sort of unusual. The family had a house on the South Carolina coast, and in the summer, the moms and the grandmothers and the aunts would go there with all the kids, right? And then the dads and the uncles and the grandfathers would like show up for like maybe a day, maybe 2 days on the weekend, but then they'd go again. And so I have to say pretty early on, I saw like, wow, like these guys are doing really well financially. They're doing their own thing. They obviously get a lot of satisfaction out of it, but they're also not around very much. And they're not really, and so I have to say, my dad was not really there for a lot of my life growing up. And one thing I always knew, like apart from career choice and everything, was that that's not the kind of dad I was going to be. Like I was going to be the kind of dad who doesn't miss a sporting event, the kind of dad who's, at all the birthday parties and all the things and goes on vacation with kids and things like that. So that was part of it. I also have to say too, I'm just the way I'm kind of wired. I mean, there could have easily been a path where I was, I went to divinity school and became we grew up Methodist, so I became a Methodist preacher. And I've got people like that in my family too. I've got a lot of like pastors and preachers and things like that. So I don't know what that's about. I've always just been kind of connected to that world. But I love business. I love the game of business. I love making money. So I think where it took me a while just to kind of like sort all of that out. Like I'm never going to sell my soul to make money. Like that's really important. Like integrity, doing the right thing is super important. Being with family, super important. And then finding a way to meld those two things with actually a business that's, gives me the lifestyle that I want and provides for my family the way I want. Is the greatest thing in the world to finally get there, to have all those things. So,
yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. It's a great, great story. It makes me think about a lot about my own path. I think, I was kind of rebelling the other way, not out of absolute rebellion, but from seeing the stress and seeing the anxiety, from a young age. Is like, I don't want to live with this anxiety and stress. Still have plenty of anxiety and stress. And, I think of myself as a laid back person, but I'm also still very anxious, very, those that know me, I'm just like a high energy person. So, still have the anxiety, but it's just placed in different ways.
What does your family think about the path you've taken now?
They're definitely proud, but like, wasn't the natural path for them. So like, my mom is proud, but it's not, she's not like a, business. She's not reading the Wall Street Journal every day. It's like, So, it's just like, I give kind of cursory ideas, or she calls me Waldo because I'm traveling. She's like, where's Waldo? I'm in a different part of the world or a different part. So, and some of that's personal too. Is part of accomplishing my goals too, is just being able to travel and have, that freedom and flexibility. But, to your point about like missing games and stuff like that, like when I was kind of at my lowest, I was in New York. I was a partner in a mortgage fund, was doing, better than I'd ever done in my life. But it turned into that, kind of the culture was the Wall Street grind there. Yeah. And, one of my old partners, he said it as like a point of pride, but, he's like, I don't see my kids during the week. He says, he's on the train at, 5 a.m. He's home at, and he said that as like a point of pride. And to me, I'm like, well, you're not really winning. Like, if you can't, have a business that, earns enough money that gives you enough freedom and flexibility to enjoy your life and see your family, like, I don't think that's winning. And then, that was always one of my goals, to at least have someone told me freedom is as important as money.
Amen to that. Yeah. I mean, there's like a sacrifice period for a lot of us, no doubt about it. I mean, particularly people who are driven at all or entrepreneurial at all. I mean, there's this tension, right? Always between, do you put in that extra hour or 2 or 3 of, grinding and getting it done? Or do you just like say, no, I got to just cut it off and go home, because I want to be there for dinner tonight. I mean, it's a struggle. God, it's a struggle. It's every day. It's a struggle, but unlike your former partner, I would not be proud of not being with my kids during the week. Now, maybe they wish I was not with them during the week. That's entirely possible.
Yeah, yeah. Once you get to a point where it's like, what did one of my friends say? He goes, at some point, I just became irrelevant.
Oh yeah, no. and my kids right now, I mean, my son's 21, my daughter's 20. So it's like, yeah, I'm an afterthought. My daughter calls me sometimes and I'll just say, what do you want? Because it's always like, Daddy, I need, So, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Happy to be that guy.
That's great. So, let's dive a little bit into investments and marketing. And, I've been in this a long, long time, but I've really probably dove into marketing only really since, I guess I was marketing without knowing it for a long time. I'd sent postcards out. I saw the power of marketing in, the early 2000s, but I'd never really formally raised money like some of our mutual contacts, just because, in New York, we had pension fund money and it was really I just had to do the deals. But like this is a fascinating art and a science to me. What do you think are the key principles to connect with I guess, I'll say an audience on the financial side of the business?
So, I mean, gosh, Jack, it's an interesting thing. And I'll tell you this too, it's also a moving target. Like the way that we're doing it, I'll even say 3 or 4 years ago is not the best way to do it today. And it's like, well, what changed? Well, the technology changed for one thing. I can get into that if you want me to, but also particularly in the world of LPs, I really feel like there's been this pretty significant swing in the past 2 to 3 years, where prior to that, I mean, it was such a forgiving market. It was, it was easy to be an LP. It was easy to experience the success that comes from participating in all sorts of passive investments, because a lot of things were doing really well. You didn't really hear about too many things that went south. And then here in the past couple of years, I mean, this as well as anybody, right? I mean, it's been harder to, on the operator side, it's been harder to continue to deliver the results that you were delivering before, right? And again, we don't need to get into why that is. It's macroeconomic stuff. It's, just the struggles, particularly in the multifamily space with the interest rate environment and rates resetting and whatnot. But so what does all that mean? Well, what that means now is that there is a level of skepticism. There's a level of fear. There's a level of needing to know more about, for example, a particular investment opportunity than you really saw in years prior. And it's funny. I mean, there's so many extremes of this. Like there's a referral group of medical professionals. And I think you probably know who I'm talking about. It's run by a former dentist who has people in his group now. And I used to raise money out of that group for our friends in Philadelphia. And when I would talk to these medical professionals, a lot of times, this was like back in, let's just say 2015 or so, where this sort of thing was just kind of getting off the ground. The idea that, you can invest in a private placement and invest passively and drop $100K in, and you'd get like a nice little monthly or quarterly distribution out of it, and you didn't have to do anything, right? I mean, it's just purely passive. I remember talking to these people, and we talk about the opportunity, but then they kind of cut me off at some point, and they just want to know, well, what is Dr. Harrison doing? I just want to do what he's doing. And my point in saying that is, there was this one guy, Dr. Harrison, in the group that everybody looked up to, right? And he kind of gotten in early with the passive investing thing. He was good at it. He knew how to manage it. And all they needed to know was that this one other guy who's in their group was doing it. And if he was doing it, that was fine. Sign me up, right? And if he wasn't doing it, it's like, well, no. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. It was this idea of not really having to think for yourself, And it's also the case that in that particular group, the opportunities that were presented to them were vetted by the founders. And there's a little bit of a filter there. So they had more trust. But that's what I would call a very naive approach to on the LP side of choosing what you're going to invest in, right? Quick little digression, if you could stand it, Jack. So, I also have a group that trains capital raisers how to tell their story in such a way that they are able to better appeal to LPs. And in that group, I do this in partnership with a guy named Lance Peterson, who, a lot of people in this space know. Lance has been around forever, just one of the sharpest guys in the space. Great guy. One of the things Lance teaches is like, when you're an alternative investing opportunity provider, you're not going to get success. You're not going to get people to invest with you unless they have 4 separate conversions. What he means by that is they've got to basically get over like 4 separate hurdles before they wire you money. Hurdle number 1 is you've got to convince them that alternative investing in general is okay, right? I mean, people, and this is people like your, straight down the tracks, traditional investors, stocks and bonds, Wall Street, right? Those kinds of guys, or money market funds. Just like really like alternative investing. What the heck is that? Like, okay, so you've got to get them over that first. Once they get over that, they're like, okay, yeah, I could be interested in this. I understand the benefits of some of the alternative investing approaches. The next conversion is you've got to actually convince them that your particular strategy, your investing thesis, your asset class could make sense and could help them. So whether it's multifamily, it's self-storage, it's private credit, whatever it is, it's like you've got to convince them that strategy or that approach or that asset class has unique benefits, right? The third conversion they've got to make as investors is that you are actually capable of executing that particular strategy or being successful in that asset class. And then the fourth and last one that you have to convince people of is that you, the operator, are actually going to be good stewards of their capital, right? Yes to alternative investments. Yes to your particular investment thesis or asset class. Yes to you being able to execute it, but now can I trust you with my money? And so that is harder now than it used to be. Particularly, I'd say that fourth one, right? There's more scrutiny on the operators, more scrutiny on, in fact, you may know this, but there was that wonderful community called Left Field Investors. I think you were associated with that group. I feel like maybe I just saw you at another conference, when they were there, but there's a group that has sprung up inside what used to be Left Field Investors is now Passive Pockets, led by a guy named Mark Halpern, who's a Philly guy. And it's called the Deep Due Diligence Group, right? And I'm not trying to plug them. I don't know enough about them to plug them. I like Mark, but why does this group exist? Why did they spring up in the past few years? Well, they sprung up in the past few years because all of a sudden there's this realization that we as LPs have to basically do more to vet and to underwrite the people that we invest with. And that's what his whole group, it's called DDD, deep due diligence. Like, we are going to go deeper on you before we invest with you now. And I think that's the climate you're up against. So I'll bring this all around if I could. As advertisers, we have to just do a little more. We have to tell a different kind of story. We have to have social media that reinforces the messages we're putting out on ads, that the asset class is good, that we can execute the asset class or the investment strategy, and that we are going to be good stewards of our capital. It's like all of a sudden we have to show up better. And it's harder. It's harder to raise capital now than it used to be for all of those reasons.
That's all for this episode of Alternative Investor Mastermind. Now that you know the many alternative opportunities out there all up for the taking, you can finally become ultra connected and ultra wealthy. Get more valuable advice from the experts by subscribing to the show at alternativeinvestormastermind.com. Become a winner in the world of passive investing today in alternative investment strategies. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.